Welcome to Zog World. Population U. This is a touchy subject, but I want to talk about it anyway. Regardless of if you think that we live under some sort of Zionist-occupied government or not, you can't deny the fact that there is an extreme amount of foreign influence in the United States government, and in Western Europe as well, but since I live in the United States, we're going to focus on that today. Just how much power and influence and money goes into the hand of political Zionists in the United States? I'm sure we'll never get a concrete number, but we can kind of start to deconstruct just exactly how much power they have in the United States. I'm going to bring some images up on screen, and I hope you'll follow along. And first I'm going to talk about influence. So, Jews have the highest percentage of voter turnout of any ethnic group. Roughly 94% live in 13 key electoral college states, which alone are worth enough electoral votes to elect the president. It is clear Israel has the support of one of the largest veto groups in the country. Now, on the topic of political action groups, I'll get to that in a minute, but AIPAC in particular meets with every candidate running for Congress, and they even ask each candidate to author a position paper on their views on the U.S.-Israel relationship. As for PAC funding, from 1990 to 2006, data shows that pro-Israel interests have contributed over $56 million in individual, group, and soft money donations to federal candidates and party committees. Pro-Israel figures have established a commanding presence at the American Enterprise Institute, the Center for Security Policy, the Foreign Policy Research Institute, the Heritage Foundation, the Hudson Institute, the Institute for Foreign Policy Analysis, and the Jewish Institute for National Security Affairs. Mainstream and conservative Jewish organizations have mobilized considerable lobbying resources, financial contributions from the Jewish community, and citizens' pressure on the news media and other forums of public discourse in support of the Israeli government. Even college campuses have a large pro-Israeli campus coalition. This includes the Zionist Organization of America, AIPAC, Americans for Peace Now, the Anti-Defamation League, Kesher, the Union of Progressive Zionists, Emenu and Meretz USA Partners for Progressive Israel, among other organizations. And even student leaders who advocate pro-Israel films and groups on college campuses were eligible for being hired as emissaries of the Jewish state for their work and would receive up to $1,000 a year for their efforts. Did you know that there are those within the United States Congress that hold dual citizenship between the U.S. and Israel? When it comes to a representative position, are they representing you, their constituents, or are they representing the state of Israel? Is this a dual loyalty situation? Personally, I think that you either represent the United States or you don't. Let's talk a little bit about taxpayer-funded news media. About 20% of U.S. taxpayer-funded National Public Radio's personnel are of Jewish descent. As merely 2% of the United States population, why are dual American and Israeli Jewish citizens allowed to represent about 1/5 of the U.S. taxpayer-subsidized public radio station? You could then go in to discuss the influence of these dual citizenships amongst all media presence in the world. But for this one in particular, why is it that people who hold dual interest for a foreign state are allowed to work with publicly funded news media organizations? How about in the current administration's cabinet? We can look at a few people who might be considered dubious in their relationship with a foreign state. And I'll just put a few up on screen here. There's plenty more where that came from. And if we even listen to Trump's words himself.
I speak to you today as a lifelong supporter and true friend of Israel. I'm a newcomer to politics, but not to backing the Jewish state. In 2001, weeks after the attacks on New York City and on Washington, and frankly, the attacks on all of us, attacks that perpetrated, and they were perpetrated by the Islamic fundamentalists, Mayor Rudy Giuliani visited Israel to show solidarity with terror victims. I sent my plane because I backed the mission for Israel 100%.
As I said before, I don't have a problem with Trump. I just simply think that one of the things that we need to be wary of is his influence and allegiance with a foreign state. It's not a deal breaker for me per se, but it is very strange to me, so it's something to keep an eye on. So let's go back and talk about the political action groups for just a sec. When it comes to the United States, these political action groups take in funds, work with organizing groups and making connections between their candidates and other individuals. Some of the biggest political action groups in the entire country revolve around the American-Israeli relationship, such as the Christians United for Israel Foundation, or AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Of course, we should know just how powerful AIPAC is when it comes to controlling some of our more prominent politicians. So why does any of this matter? Why should we care about this at all? Well, one of the main reasons for me caring is the fact that my tax money is going to support a foreign state. My interests don't lie in a foreign state. My money should not be going overseas to fund weapons and supplies for a foreign state. It doesn't even matter what enemy they're fighting. It's not in my interest. If we look here between 1949 and 2015, and this is a conservative estimate, I imagine, I'm sure there's plenty of money that's off the books, $137 billion of total direct aid from the United States to Israel. $137 billion. Do you know how much money that is? Do you know how much we could have done with that money if it had been invested in the United States instead of a foreign entity? People want to go on and on about the deficit and the budget and all this. There's $137 extra billion that could have been spent somewhere else or not spent at all. Hey, guess what, U.S. taxpayer? You're footing the bill for this. The money just doesn't come out of nowhere. You're paying for it. Just think of how much time and man hours have been spent just to create this money that's being sent overseas. And then you start to realize why there's so much lobbying going on, why there's so many dual citizens and Israeli sponsors in the United States and in the United States government. It's because of things like this. $137 billion. $3 to $4 billion spent a year in aid to Israel. And you wonder why there's so many lobbyists in our country. And it isn't just Israel. I would cut all of this foreign aid as far as I'm concerned. But if we look in September of 2016, the Obama administration signed an agreement to increase foreign military financing to Israel by 27%. Yet the U.S. already gives more military aid to Israel than all other countries combined. From 2019, U.S. taxpayers will be giving $3.8 billion per year to Israel. But why is it, you might be wondering, why I have such a negative view of Israel? Well, there's a couple of reasons why. And a couple of reasons that I can't say on YouTube, otherwise I'll get forced off the platform. But I'll give you a few things here right now on screen. It's no secret that Israel spies on America. It's no secret that they take our military technology and sell it to foreign states. It's no big secret that they have the third largest nuclear stockpile in the world, and that they are not afraid to use nuclear weapons if it means securing their existence. And if you didn't already know who Jonathan Pollard was, well, let's bring him up here right now. Jonathan Pollard was a former intelligence analyst for the United States government. In 1987, as part of a plea agreement, Pollard pleaded guilty to spying for and provided top-secret classified information to Israel. He was sentenced to life in prison for violations of the Espionage Act. From this, you might be able to see why I have such a negative view of this state. There's plenty of things you could say about Israel, but they treat the United States like shit, like a doormat. They lobby our government with their dual citizenship. They constantly promote their own narrative in our media, and including our publicly funded media. Yes, you're footing the bill for their propaganda as well. And then they steal from us. They sell off our secrets. They even kill Americans without remorse. If we just want to look at something like the USS Liberty incident, it's called. But why? Why are they doing all of these things? Why is it that Israel has such a vested interest in receiving military aid and money from the United States and Western Europe? Why? I'm going to put some images up on screen and I'll see if you can figure it out yourself. Maybe I'll do a video in the future about some specifics, but if you don't know by now, you might want to get started, because you're paying for all of this, not just with money, but with blood. Anyway, I hope you've learned something from this, and thanks for listening.